Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a geographical riddle, a story that's really about technology, ambition, and how we can completely reshape the American landscape.
Okay, so let's get right into it with a paradox. We're talking about Crossett, Arkansas, a major industrial town deep in the piney woods, and it's known as the Port of Crossett. The catch? There's no major river, no ocean, no big body of water anywhere near it. So how is that possible? Well, to figure it out, we first have to understand the very ground it sits on.
You see, before we can even get to the story of industry, we have to talk about the age of water. The whole story here is founded on a landscape that water created over millennia, a place that's both incredibly rich and, frankly, incredibly dangerous. This entire region, the Arkansas Delta, isn't sitting on solid bedrock like you might think. Nope. For thousands and thousands of years, the Mississippi River and its tributaries have been dumping just immense amounts of sand, silt, and clay here. We're talking about loose, soft ground that's over 100 feet deep. It's not a world built of stone. It's a world built of silt. And because of that geology, you get a landscape of extremes. You have these very narrow, slightly elevated ridges of land right next to the rivers. That's the only naturally high and dry ground. Everything else, it's just this vast, low-lying, soggy backswamp, a dense, wet wilderness that was almost impossible to cross. For centuries, if you wanted to live here, you were stuck on those tiny little slivers of land.
So, as if the constant threat of flooding wasn't enough, that waterlogged ground holds a much scarier secret. The whole area sits inside the New Madrid seismic zone. And when a big earthquake hits, all that loose, wet sand and silt can lose its strength completely. The ground itself can literally turn into a liquid.
And we know this has happened. Big time. The proof is right there on the landscape. They're called sand blows. During massive earthquakes in the past, all that liquefied sand erupted violently up to the surface, kind of like a sandy volcano, leaving these mounds behind. This is the shaky, unstable ground people were trying to build on.
Okay, so you've got a landscape that's either a swamp or could turn into quicksand during an earthquake. How in the world do you build a major industrial center here? Well, the answer didn't come from the South. It came from northern money and a piece of technology that changed absolutely everything. By the end of the 1800s, the great pine forests up north were pretty much logged out. So savvy investors started looking south, and what they saw was a jackpot, the Great Wilderness, basically an ocean of untouched virgin pine. In 1899, a group of them ponied up the cash and bought a staggering 47,000 acres of it.
Now, these guys were sharp businessmen from Iowa, and while the town would be named for Edward Crossett, the real powerhouse, the man making it happen on the ground, was Charles Cap Gates. He and his partners saw the incredible potential in this wilderness and formed the Crossett Lumber Company. But they had one massive problem. How do you get all those trees out?
See, the old economy ran on rivers. But rivers are slow. They flood, they run low, and they definitely don't run deep into the forest where the best timber is. To really unlock the wealth of these timberlands, you needed a new system. And that system was the railroad. It was about to completely flip the logic of the landscape on its head.
The railroad basically became an artificial river made of steel. It didn't have to follow the water's path. It could cut straight through the swamps, right to the heart of the forest. It connected the trees to the mill and the mill to the world. It was a whole new geography, one dictated by industry, not nature.
So these investors didn't just build a sawmill, they built an entire town from the ground up. And in the process, they did something that was almost unheard of for that era. They created a lasting legacy.
Now this is where the story takes a fascinating turn. The typical playbook for a logging company back then was just brutal. It was known as cut out and get out. You'd clear-cut the entire forest, make a fast buck, and leave a barren wasteland behind, moving on to the next spot. But Cap Gates and his partners, they said no. They wanted to build something that would last.
And their approach was, for its time, absolutely revolutionary. They actually partnered with professional foresters from Yale University, and together, they started treating the forest not like a mine to be emptied, but like a crop to be farmed.
This idea, sustained yield forestry, was a game changer for the American South. It meant they could keep harvesting timber forever, securing the future of the company and the town of Crossett for generations to come.
So, let's put the pieces together. We have an industrial town, built by the railroad, deep in a forest, all supported by a sustainable resource. This brings us right back to our original question. Why on earth do they call it a port?
Well, the answer is that the very meaning of the word port has evolved. We think of a port, we think of ships and water. But in today's world of logistics, there's something called an inland port or a dry port. And it's all about function. It's a massive hub where goods are transferred between trains and trucks.
And that is exactly what Crossett is. Its harbor isn't a bay of water. It's the gigantic complex of paper and lumber mills. Its docks aren't piers. They're the endless lines of railroad sidings and truck bays. And the shipping channels aren't dredged rivers. They're the steel rails of the railroad, carrying raw timber in and finished products out to the rest of the country.
It all comes down to this. Crossett is a port of function, not form. It didn't need an ocean to earn that title. It earned it by doing the economic work of a port, being that critical hub for collecting, processing, and distributing goods. Its whole identity was made possible by the railroad.
The story of Crossett is just this perfect, amazing example of how a single technology can completely rewrite the rules and even redefine a basic word like port. And it really leaves you with a big question, doesn't it? What other fundamental ideas about our world, about our cities, our jobs, our communities, are being quietly rewritten by technology right now?